recording and we'll have them online as well, but this is fine. Okay, so everyone has Rhino open with the Farnsworth house, right? Like this. And you have this toolbar. Okay, perfect. So this tutorial is VRay for Rhino, but we'll also be talking about something called VRay Channels, and it's a way to split up the rendering into multiple layers so that you can bring it into Photoshop and really easily manipulate images. How much do you guys know VRay at all? A little bit? None? None? A little bit? Okay. So I'm going to go through the basics a little quickly because a lot of it is just knowing where the buttons are and then trying and playing around. And then I'll go into the VRay channels. Okay, so we have a model here. And do you guys know how to move around in Rhino and everything? Okay. So just so you can set yourself a view, I don't know, something pretty. And what you want to do first is, let's see, we can click on, let me go through the buttons, start at the basics. Okay, so these two rows right here are the VRay buttons. So there's a materials editor. So if you click on that, you can set materials. There's a whole list of materials, aluminum, chrome, glass, etc. So you can set layers as a certain material. And that's really important to understand that the way the materials work are by layer. So if you go into your layers panel or look at the layers panel, you can see that under material we have the glass as clear glass material. And so this is where you would set it. You can double click on the material and then browse and choose a material. Okay. Okay, so that's one way to add materials to your different layers. And then if you go back to the VRay material editor, so there are kind of two different interfaces for materials, the layers panel and then also this VRay panel. Yes?
I have a problem with the auxiliary for rather than not having the other.
It's fine. Oh, okay, so, sorry, I skipped this step for you. If you go to render, and then current renderer, and you'll want to set that as VRay for right now. Perfect. And now everything should be set.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so in the VRay material editor, which is under the VRay tools, you get a lot more options about how the material may actually render. So reflection, glossiness, there's a whole list of things you could play with. But I would recommend keeping it simple in the beginning and not, the materials are pretty much set for what they need to be. So just choosing the right material is a step in the right direction, and that these numbers you can leave as they are. Okay, so that's setting materials. Today we're not going to really go into actually applying materials. We're going to do a clay rendering so that Joe next week is going to do Photoshop manipulations to add textures that way. Okay, so that's a little bit about materials. You know, that was fast. The main toolbar for VRay is this Options tab here, O. If you click on that, you should get something that looks like this. So this is where you're going to change your main rendering options. So let's see. The main ones you want to look at is camera. So VRay is set up to render as you would take a picture. So if you understand how photography works, then it's easier to understand how light is interacting with the rendered image. And so the main ones under camera you'll look at is shutter speed. And so shutter speed is basically how fast the shutter opens and closes on a camera. And so in this case, what's a little tricky, and I will also post this Word or PDF so that if you guys want it in the future, but so here it talks about how the shutter speed is inverse. So the larger the number, the less light you'll let in. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're playing with these. So
the shutter speed is just like a camera.
Just like a camera, right? So the longer you let it open and close, the more light you're letting into the image.
And the small number.
Smaller the number, the faster, so less light is let in. So, and so something similar to that is the F number. And I think I have I'll show you. So F number is also kind of the aperture of the camera. And so a larger number is a smaller opening. A little counterintuitive. But again, you're letting in less light with the larger number, more light with the smaller. So that's another way that you can manipulate how much light you're letting in. But with the F number, you're also changing the depth of field. So, you know, if you take a picture up close and it's in focus, but then the background's blurry, sometimes the F number can change that as well. So just things to keep in mind as you're changing the numbers. That is pretty much all I would change under camera unless you're getting into really detailed work. So F number and shutter speed. Okay, so let's close that for now. Let's go to environment. And since we're doing clay rendering and we're not dealing with materials in this tutorial, you want to set both of these color blocks here and here to white. So that will give you the white environment that we're looking for. Everyone on board so far? Okay. So the next one we want to look at is output. So this is really important because when you render, it will only render a certain sized image. So you have to set that first. And so also on this Word doc I'll give you guys, it gives you some of the typical sizes. So the smallest is 640 by 480. So let's click on that one. And that you'll be able to render faster. You can go through iterations, you can test ideas really quickly, but it's going to give you a small image, and we'll see that in just a second. And then obviously the larger you get, the more detail, the longer the render is going to take, but the bigger the file is, the more you can do with it. And especially for boards, you're going to want to render at a larger size. And that's something that you just kind of have to play with or look up online as to what size is good for which. Okay. Okay, so that's pretty much it to just start trying and seeing what we get. Just lied, there's one more thing. We want to add a source of sun. So let's do an exterior perspective. And so to add a sun, you click on the button that says sun. And yours probably looks something like this. Is that correct? Okay. So you can just move around the sun using these manual controls, but I think it's easiest to unclick manual control and just set the date, the time, and the place that you want to render at. So here, date and time, you can select whatever you want, but I'll just click now, and it'll go to right now. Pretty simple. And then location, you can also select, if you go through this list of cities, you can select something that's closest to wherever you're trying to render. And for today, you can also just click here. I'll do right now, right here. And that's it for setting the sun preferences, but now we need to place the sun. And it doesn't matter, you can place it anywhere. So if you just click, so you got the little crosshairs, if you just click that down, you get this arrow. Should delete my old sun. Okay, So the only thing that matters is that you know where the arrow is so that you can modify it, delete it, whatever. But it doesn't matter exactly where. Okay, so everyone have an arrow that's supposed to be a sun? Okay. So with the sun, you can modify elements. So if you click on the arrow and go to the Properties tab on the right-hand side, you should get this Modify Sun Properties menu. Is that what you guys are? Oh, I can make this bigger, I'm sorry. Does that help at all? Not really. Okay, so does everyone have this menu up? So you can modify the sun again and change where the location is. If you didn't set it correctly, you can go back into this menu that way. That's Modify Sun. But what we want to look at right now is the characteristics of the sun. So the main ones are the size of the sun. So these are arbitrary, but basically the bigger the sun is, the more diffuse light you're going to get, the more realistic. The smaller, it's more direct. So something like 70 is about right to be fairly realistic. And so that's the size of the sun. And then under shadows in subdivisions, if you increase that to about 20, you'll get more realistic shadows. So if any of you have done value drawing, these subdivisions are like layers of value. So the more you have, the more realistic it looks. But again, the longer it takes to render. So you can play with those options. Okay, so now I believe that's it for the sun. We can try to test some renderings. So zoom in and set, oops. Say, Elliot, do you know why it's like only zooming in extra zoomy?
No.
Okay, well, we'll do a rendering
what
here.
What you do is click on something and then type zoom select. Or do ZS. And then
There we go.
it should work.
Okay. Okay, so you can set whatever kind of perspective you want. Let's say that we think this looks good. And then you can just hit this R, which is render. So in the toolbar, the R. Okay, and it pops up a new window. Oops. Sorry, try to make this a little smaller. Oh, okay. Sorry, I have a bunch of stuff set right now. Give me 1 second. Sorry about this. I should have opened a new file. Okay, let me try that again. Okay, so is this something like what you got? Maybe? Not at all. Okay, so yours is really bright. Okay, so what you can do is go back into those options. Yep. And then play with the camera. So it's way too bright. So you need to increase. Let me click on that one. You need to slow. That's not good. Have you ever had it not allow you to use the options?
Is this all turned on? Yours is on the phone.
So you want to change either the shutter speed or the F number to make it darker. And so this goes for everyone. All you want to do is just, if it's too bright, change the F number and the shutter speed, press the R again, see what happens, change it, press the R, see what happens. So it's a lot of iteration and trying to see exactly what you want it to look like.
I just found another side here.
Oh, okay. Yep. And so I would play again with the F number and the shutter speed and start to see if you can get really realistic looking shadows, realistic looking light. What are you guys producing stuff?
Really like it. I ran into that
Mine's
one
so
house.
slow. Oh, you know what? I bet there are a couple suns maybe that were placed in there.
Okay.
So if you zoom out, you can double check if there are other arrows floating around. Yeah. So get rid of one of them. I think that's my bad. There's probably already a sun in the file. Extra bright world today. Okay, so we'll try again and you'll change it. So did you, by any chance, there may be a couple other suns in this. So if you zoom out a little bit, there may be. No, it looks like there's just one. Okay. So I think I have mine set at. I have mine set at 300 for shutter speed and 8 for the F number. And I think that tends to look pretty good. It's not too washed out. You're getting some gradients of shadows and light. It's not perfect, but so I don't know if you want to try that. Yep. And did you change the sun settings to 70 and 20 earlier? Click on the sun. 70 and 20. Yes, you did. Okay. Is anyone getting the same as I did? Close. Okay. If it's close, that's fine. You want to go back to the editor and go to environment. I'm not sure actually.
What's the question?
Sorry. His whole background is one washed color
In
in the rendering. So
what is the function? Go to show. Okay, so go to options at the top. Close switches. Okay, sometimes when you're doing it like a
within the Rhino
Yeah.
interface. Okay, so you were at a different location that has a much brighter sun than here. So now I think you can play a little bit more. So it's just, so the variables are your sun, so you need to make sure that the sun is set to the time, the location you want, and the size. So that's one variable. And then the camera, how much light you're letting into the actual camera is another variable. So those are the two I would check right away if you're getting way oversaturated images or way undersaturated images. Size of the sun. So click on the little arrow that's supposed to be the sun, and then move. There should be, yeah. Well, actually, no, the size is right below it. So under Modify Sun, size up to 70. Or you can make it more if you want, but that's just kind of a number that I've seen multiple times, and it works. So, and then the shadows are on that panel as well. So under Shadows Subdivisions, you can increase those to get more gradient of shadows, kind of more layers. Okay, so that is the basics of VRay. You can change materials by layers, you can apply materials, and then you just test those different conditions and try to construct the outcome you're looking for. So what I wanted to go over more today, which is going to be quick, is VFB channels. So have any of you heard of VFB channels? I know I just kind of told them, but so VFB channels are a way to separate out layers within the rendering. So you can have a layer that's just the shadows, a layer that's diffuse lighting, a layer that's sun lighting, etc. And when you bring it into Photoshop, you can manipulate them individually, and it makes it really easy to construct a lot of different ideas and a lot of different renderings in Photoshop. So even though it's a couple extra steps in VRay and in rendering, it will actually save you a lot of time if you like to go into Photoshop and do your details and testing of ideas in Photoshop. So let me just go through it, and then I'll say that all again so we can understand the whole idea of it. So the VFB channels are again in this options menu. So where all kind of the main rendering elements are. So if you click on VFB channels, you get all of this stuff. And once again, I will put this online, which says all of it. So don't feel like you have to write down everything. This has the entire list of which ones you're going to want to use and how to do it. Okay, so the ones that you want to select are RGB and alpha. Those are, any image has those two main channels. And then if you hit Control, you'll want diffuse, reflection, refraction, specular. We have all those. Okay, move down. All of the raw GI, raw light, raw shadow, and Z depth. So those are the main ones we're going to want. And I'll explain a little bit about each of them, but honestly it's just either you just go through the motions or you're going to have to look it up and try and understand what each of them means, because they're all different. But the two that I really want to point out, since we're not doing materials today, we're not going to use this one, but material ID is a way that you can tell VRay that this material has a certain identity, and it will put those all into different layers. So I'll show you actually, let me show you this. Okay, so this is the material channel. This is what VRay will output. And if you bring this into Photoshop, all you have to do is select the green, and you can manipulate all of those pieces at once. So, you know, normally in Photoshop, you'd have to go and select all the windows or select everything that's stone. This is a way that if you've already parsed out your materials and layered them, just use it, and you can bring it into Photoshop so much easier. I'm not going to go into that one today because it is a little more in-depth, but I definitely recommend trying it. And we're back. Okay. And then Z-depth here. Oh, goodness. Okay. Z-depth is, you can see that it's the only one that has these controls along the bottom. And all it is depth of field. So if the camera's in one spot, the Z-depth is basically the distance from the first thing you see to the very last thing you see. So, and it just codes it by black and white. Set it by camera. Basically, that's the easiest way to do it. If you set it where the camera is, then it just does it automatically. If that's not working, you can actually go in, measure distances, and type them in for black and white. But if you don't have to, obviously don't. So let's keep it set by camera. All right, so now that that's done, we'll want to just render again. So hit the R. And this may take just a little bit longer because now you're getting all of these channels together. So we'll just wait. You guys have any questions so far? Is it too fast? Is it too much? Okay, too slow. You're not even paying attention.
Like your render is black, it's high contrast, and this is.
You know, I'm not sure why it's doing that. Mine automatically did that, so I'll have to look into it.
It's fine. I can try it.
Okay. I'm sure it's just a setting of background versus infinite plane, but I'm not exactly sure where that is. Sorry. Getting there. Well, it's okay for today. I mean, it could be the location. If you're in, if somehow you didn't click Minnesota, then you might be in like Buenos Aires where it's super bright and warm. Yeah, so click unclick manual and then hit now. So that's today now and here. And I bet that'll change your settings. So yeah. Because Minnesota has a much different sun. So those are, again, sun location. Check that first, and then check your camera settings. And that should change how it looks. Okay, so I'm going to keep going unless you want to wait for your renderings to be done. But you can look up here. Okay, so now I have the rendered image, and if I go to this upper left tab where it says RGB color, I have all of those channels that we set. So here's Z-depth, and you can see it's categorized as black and white, and whatever's whitest is closest to the camera, and then fades black to furthest away. So that's a way this channel gives you depth of field. And you can look through the other ones, they may not look like much, but this is basically all these layers composited together is how VRay makes these renderings. Okay, So great, but now what do we do with those? So if you click the multiple floppy disk button, we can save all of these at once. So I'll say Farnsworth and save it to desktop, I guess. Save. And so they're all on the desktop. Okay. So that's how you get these channels out of VRay. So this is kind of the last step. Once you've set your rendering, once you've gotten the lighting correct, everything's beautiful, then you set up these channels and do the final large rendering. Okay. So you don't necessarily want to be messing with the channels each time. It's just going to take more time. But once you're ready, you'll set the channels and then save them outside of VRay. Okay, so if you guys want to open up Photoshop then, we can start to import these, and I'll show you how to put them together. Is everyone still on board so far? Look confused?
No, I just, it's super bright.
Oh.
Something happened. So.
It's okay. It doesn't matter for now, I guess. It could be the location, because both of theirs, the location was somehow changed after setting it. So you could check again where the sun is. I don't know. Okay, so once you have Photoshop open, what's really great is if you go to File, Scripts, and then Load Files into Stack. So this is going to basically load all those files into alphabetical order all at once. Super easy. So just browse and find all of the channels that you saved out as JPEGs. And click OK, and it'll start to load them as separate layers. Okay. So the only problem is that script puts them into alphabetical order, which is not necessarily the order that they should be layered to make the composite image. So at the top, the Farnsworth JPEG, or whatever you've named it, is the final rendered image. So that's pretty much just for reference. It's not really a layer. So you can turn that off. And actually we can turn all of these off for now while we move them around. Okay, so again, this is one of those orders that you just have to have written down. So we'll just go through it, and again, I'll give this to you. Okay, so the first one is the JPEG, which is also RGB. Then you want to move the shadows under that. So just click and drag it up. Then refraction under shadows, specular under refraction, reflection next, then raw light, raw GI, diffuse. Okay, so I know that seems kind of arbitrary, but it's basically just the way it layers from bottom of the image to top, layering up the light, the shadows, all of that together. And what you end up with on the bottom is the alpha and the Z depth. So these two we want to put as channels in Photoshop. So channels are they just hold information. So we don't want these two as a layer. So if you select Z depth layer, and then Control A to select all, or Control A, and then copy. Go back to channels, and on the bottom there's this little page, so it's create a new channel. And you can paste that's weird. you should be able to just paste the Z channel right in there. Okay. And then do the same for alpha. So just select all, back to channels, new channel, paste. And just to keep yourself clear, make sure you label the first one Z depth, and the other one can stay as alpha. Okay, so again, kind of seems like an arbitrary move, but... And then whenever you're in channels, you want to click back onto RGB at the top, because that will actually give you something to see. Okay, so if we can delete both alpha and Z depth out of layers now that we've moved them to channels. Okay, so your layers look something like this, right? Ordered a certain way, and your channels include Z depth and alpha that you brought in there. Okay. I know it's confusing right now. And also, I really encourage you to go to Joe's tutorial, because then he'll actually show you how to use all of these. So select it in layers. Yep, so select all and copy, and then go to channel, new, so the little page that you're on, yep, and then just paste. And the only thing is, there we go, okay, so copy, new channel, paste. I don't know why it wasn't before. I don't know.
Okay.
It could have been that we have to have that one on. I'm not. It works for mine. And then so if you turn the alpha channel on, if you click on it to highlight and do the same thing, copy. Yep. And paste. I think you may have. The only thing is for this you have to select all again. Copy. I think that worked. And so then click back on RGB. And then you can delete those two layers. Okay, so I know this seems really arbitrary, and I'm sorry about that. But again, once you get this set up, you can start to manipulate layers and build your rendering really quickly. So, okay, now that we've parsed out Z depth and alpha into channels, we can start to work through the layers and blend them in a very particular way. So if we start with having raw GI and diffuse on, we want to duplicate diffuse. And so all this is doing, diffuse layer is basically just information about how light is washing across surfaces, and raw light and raw GI are your two main lighting sources. Okay, so what we're going to do is basically blend these modes so that you have a layer that acts as light. Okay, so copied that one, move one diffuse layer under raw lighting, and then keep the other one under raw GI. And so we're just going to work with GI and diffuse right now. So click on raw GI, and up here this is the blend mode drop-down menu. So this blends layers together, and what you want to do is click multiply. And then, so there's a trick in Photoshop that if you click Alt and then between two layers, you see this little arrow and box pop up, and then click. So that this little arrow means that the multiply layer is only acting on this layer below it. So these two are only layering together, basically. And then let's do the same thing. We can turn on raw light and diffuse light. Let's do the exact same thing for that. So click on raw lighting, blend mode of multiply, and then Alt click between the two and allow that raw light to act only on the diffuse light below it. Okay. And to keep things clean, I would start to group things. Okay, so if you click the little folder, I guess, on the bottom, that'll give you a group, and then click the two and drag it in there. So now I have a group with those two layers in it, and do the exact same thing for the bottom two. Okay, so this is just keeping everything in order. Okay, so those are our main lighting conditions. So when you're manipulating light in Photoshop, those are the two groups you're going to want to go to and play with different blend modes, play with adding color, maybe adding different materials. You can start to do that easily. So as we chug along up, if you turn on the visibility of the reflection layer and click on it, we want to make that blend mode linear dodge. So almost all of these, the shadows, the refraction, the specular, and the reflection, all of these particular qualities of light, not the general qualities like the raw GI and the raw light, these are going to be linear dodged. So it's just a different way of layering or compositing things together. Yeah. Okay. And then we can do the same for specular, linear dodge, refraction, linear dodge. And shadow's actually a bit different because, as you can see, it's really overpowering. It's pretty much black. So for that one, there's a couple extra steps. We want to select all of it, so Control A, and then we can invert it. So if you go to Image, Adjustments, Invert, and then set the opacity to maybe around 20 or so. Okay. So, don't know why this one looks a lot different than my last one. So those are the main steps to get set to start working in Photoshop to add materials or to manipulate light. Let me pull up. Yeah, I feel like that's kind of all I have. I know that's a whirlwind. But, so this is, I know it doesn't look like anything, but it's setting you up for the next stage of manipulating in Photoshop, which Joe is going to talk about next Wednesday. So do you guys have any questions? It's really fast.
Can I download the VRay to my own computer?
Yes.
It's free.
No.
No.
You can do a trial
Okay.
for 30 days. Or how much is it? Like
160 or something.
160 for a year? Or for just the license?
For a year.
Get a combo.
If you use the school's computers, you have to remember that VRay toolbar progression because for some reason they're not downloaded on the computers. And I will upload, this is an entire list of what I went over and has much more detail. So if you want to go through it more yourself, take more time to do it, this will be online, as well as this file, the Rhino file, if you want to keep trying with this. So it's going to be on the Digital Assistant website, right? Which is, I don't really know the best way to get there, so I always do UMN Woodshop. And then, so if you go to their webpage, on the right-hand side, there's the DigiFab Lab and Digital Assistant program. And that has a lot of information about previous tutorials, workshops, and all that jazz. Yeah, thank you.